You know what hurts? Watching a show you are really enjoying get cancelled. And it used to hurt more in the 2000s when I was watching said series on television broadcast instead of a streaming app. Which meant not only was I waiting a week for my shows to get a new episode, unless it was a rerun, in which case the wait was for a day, but I was also susceptible to having the show cancelled. But you know what? Things happen, and we move on. And even with the switch to streaming, it is no secret that great shows can get cancelled, bringing me to my desire to make a list of 10 amazing horror shows across broadcast and streaming that not only get cancelled, but aesthetically stood out to me a lot, since horror does come with a big focus on visuals.
But before you get worried, the shows in the list are great, and they do not leave you high and dry. Those that do are anthologies, and those that are not anthologies do wrap up the introduced mystery. The only problem with them, however, is that the wrap comes with the introduction of a new mystery that you want to see explored. That being said, let's jump into the list.
Always the new boy at school, always the stranger. Always.
Hannibal. Starting off strong with the name we are all familiar with, starring one of the biggest heartthrobs of our time, that is Mads Mikkelsen, we have Hannibal. The story follows the dynamic between Hugh Dancy's Will Graham, who is a special investigator at the FBI, and Dr. Hannibal Lecter, played by Mikkelsen, a forensic psychiatrist with whom Graham goes on to share an agonising dynamic. You see, the thing is, Graham is gifted at his work of hunting down serial killers, precisely because he can visualise himself as the killer, committing the crime, which helps him understand their behaviours and motivations. But kinda like method acting, where actors get too mentally overwhelmed by having to step into the shoes of a complex character, Graham goes through worse, with the investigations taking a huge toll on his psyche, throwing him into the clutches of Hannibal, who becomes his psychiatrist. But what Graham does not know is that Hannibal is secretly not only a serial killer, but also a cannibal. As the notorious Chesapeake Ripper, which is Hannibal's street name, he is fascinated by the workings of Graham's mind. Instead of healing his patient, however, Hannibal takes advantage of him and begins to manipulate him, kickstarting their messed up cat and mouse dynamic, but also causing them to form a codependency with one another, as they realise that they are two geniuses who can only be understood by the other. After all, being too smart is isolating. Hannibal wants to manipulate the FBI from within via Graham for his protection, but his primary goal becomes to break down the blockers in Graham's mind and turn him into a killer. And to find a man with Graham's genius with such a fragile state of sanity comes to Hannibal as a golden opportunity. While the premise in itself is fascinating, what makes Hannibal stand out more as a show is its masterful cinematography that often makes it look like a canvas come to life. Some of the visuals are dreamlike, such as that of the woman with a bloodied abdomen floating in the midst of an all-black space, or the juxtaposition of the yellow tinge that accompanies frames involving Graham, and the green that accompanies everything Hannibal. The cinematography revels in using negative space and overlapping silhouettes while prioritising symmetry above all, and Mikkelsen has the perfectly chiselled face to allow the teen to play with shadows. Other iconic moments, such as the stag standing in the middle, allow for brilliant visual metaphors. But what truly stands out is how each element used is something that is very ordinary, and yet this ordinary is twisted to evoke a sense of psychological paranoia. After all, the human mind reacts uncomfortably to the ordinary gone wrong, which is exactly why a monster is less scary than the uncanny valley phenomenon. With all things considered, it is unfortunate that Hannibal got cancelled after season 3, that too following a cliffhanger due to low viewership, thanks to graveyard time slots, while its slow pacing and philosophical overtones began to alienate casual viewers. Marianne. On the topic of Uncanny Valley, I must talk about Samuel Bowden's French horror series, Marianne. For starters, I'm quite fond of European television, and as expected, Marianne did not disappoint. Neither in terms of story, nor in terms of visuals, but as it goes, it was unfortunately cancelled due to low viewership. The story revolves around Emma, a young and successful novelist who turned her childhood nightmares into a best-selling horror series revolving around an evil witch known as Marianne, who was the wife of the demon Beleth and opposed by the witch slayer Lizzie Lark. But the story kicks off with Emma wrapping up her Marianne series. Unbeknownst to her, Marianne was not so fictional after all, and was unhappy about a series centred around her coming to an end. So she set her plot in motion with the intention of getting Emma to return to her hometown of Eldon and make her write more Marianne again, so she could continue hurting people in real life. During a book signing event in Paris, Emma is approached by Caroline, a childhood friend from Eldon, who warns her that her mother, Madame d'Ogeron, believes she is Marianne, the witch from Emma's books. Caroline is not trying to bring Marianne back to Eldon. Marianne is already in play, seemingly using d'Ogeron as a host and pushing Emma to keep writing. Caroline's role is to warn Emma, beg her to come home, and later deliver the terrifying message that if Emma does not continue the story, her parents will be next. Things kick off when Caroline hangs herself in public, forcing Emma to return to Eldon for answers. Long story short, it turns out Marianne is a parasitic witch that can jump host bodies, and there is a crazy reveal of who she truly is later into the story. While each of her host bodies have evoked a sense of fear, none were as frightening as that of Madame d'Ogeron's. The styling, makeup, and the performance of the actress Marianne Herbstmeyer worked in cohesion to present to us an extremely visually mortifying character, characterized by her oddly creepy smile and bulging eyes. Her face gets creepier when you can see the sclera from above the eyeball, basically classic serial killer eyes. And Marianne as Madame d'Ogeron had all that and more. I'm not the type to find horror works scary, I like them because they're interesting. But this really did a number on me. It's something you keep worrying about when it's dark if you just watch the show. Genuinely, give the actress a humongous award for this. There are also ridiculous moments, such as those of Marianne sitting across Emma and peeing while Emma's friend Camille is scared beyond imagination. To make matters worse, Marianne forces Camille to feel it while calling herself filthy with a lot of creepy glee, and when the witch changes her host body from Madame d'Ogeron to the next, she takes away the Madame's eyesight, leaving her without her vision and resulting in the iconic Marianne poster of the Marianne Herbstmeyer with a blindfold covering her eyes. To be fair, if you are faint of heart and have a high propensity for nightmares, you can skip this one. (1899). We cannot talk European television without talking about Baran bo Odar and Jan Fries, the married masterminds behind my arguably top 1 television series of all time, Dark. The massive success of Dark meant that we would want another complicated sci-fi mystery from them, bringing us to 1899. Although German, the show is multilingual and features languages such as English, Danish, Cantonese, French, Polish, Spanish, and Portuguese. And it's because you have people from all across Europe travelling from the UK on the steamship known as Kerberos to start their lives anew in New York City, USA. Things get complicated when Kerberos intercepts a distress signal from a ship known as Prometheus, which had vanished 4 months ago. We see protagonist and neuroscientist Maura Larson work alongside the captain of Kerberos, Ake Larson, as bizarre events begin to take place. By the way, the actor playing Ake, Andreas Pietschmann, played adult Jonas in Dark. Anyway, the people on the ship are seemingly plagued by nightmares of their worst memories and fears ever since Kerberos came into contact with Prometheus. Maura herself dreams of being strapped in a mental asylum and wakes up with marks of the chair straps on her wrists. She has no memory of the event, but does possess a cryptic letter from her brother and the desire to find her father, who seems to know something. Then there is the mysterious boy found aboard the Prometheus, Elliot, who does not say a word, but Maura is hell-bent on protecting him for some reason. Ake has his own demons, and the ship begins to get plagued by sciencey mysteries, such as a mechanical beetle that only Elliot can control. We get secret portals, time and space hopping, and more within a single ship, making it evident that 1899 is a sci-fi after all, and not the period mystery it started off as. And this is where visuals come into play. When the series begins, it looks nothing like sci-fi. Every image, every prop, every costume implies history. We don't expect to see such characters as part of science fiction in the first place, but as the visuals show us a black pyramid and what seems to be a man-made beetle, we begin to feel a whiplash. Like, hey, does this really belong in this show? Trust me, it does. But this is something you find out over time, and 1899 blends these two worlds seamlessly. My only gripe, the series was cancelled. I was literally online googling, when will 1899 return? When will 1899 be in production again? After finishing the series, I eventually accepted my fate, more so because the story does get kind of wrapped up. But we are left with multiple unanswered questions. It's more like a first season that wraps its own mysteries up, but it does so by introducing a bigger plot, which is what we want to know more about. The good thing about this is that either way, 1899 does not feel unfinished, which is why I like recommending this show. Had it created a massive plot and not dropped any lore, I actually would not put this in my list. I don't want to give you guys the worst case of blue balls.
When she comes back.
Channel Zero. Coming back to American works, we have the horror anthology series known as Channel Zero, created by Nick Antosca. What's interesting about the series is that it is based on creepypastas, which you might remember as a phenomenon like a decade ago. Anyway, Channel Zero has 4 seasons, with each season exploring a different creepypasta. The first season kicks off with Candle Cove by Chris Straub and is centered around a man obsessively recollecting a children's pirate-themed puppet television show from the 1980s. This prompts said man, Mike Painter, who is a child psychologist, to return to his hometown of Iron Hill in Ohio. which is surprisingly the only place that aired the show, more so because his twin brother had been murdered back in Iron Hill in 1988, and he is sure this murder is tied to those of multiple local children and the mysterious cancellation of the puppet show. The second season is No End House, where a young woman and her friend check out the tourist attraction of the House of Horrors and soon realise that this is not your run-of-the-mill touristy place. Instead, something's genuinely wrong. Then there is the third season, Butcher's Block, where the primary character has a schizophrenic sister. They have seemingly moved to a new city that, unfortunately for them, has a notorious track record for mysterious disappearances. As they get entangled with a rumour, the two sisters join hands to try and find what has been taking away the people of the city. And finally, we have The Dream Door, where Tom and Gillian, who are a newly married couple, have their marriage put to the test, as they find a secret door in the basement that leads both of them to their dark secrets. Among all 4 seasons, No End House is popularly considered to be the best one by most, but if you ask me, they are all great. The visuals are a standout because you get to see this uncanny teeth monster, or rather the tooth child, in the very first season itself, and it all feels like a childhood horror come to life because I remember enjoying such creepypastas and weird creepy images such as a face full of teeth and a palm full of holes. Every season visually evokes the feeling of being swallowed up by something sinister while you are trying to run away from it. In fact, Butcher's Block does use a very similar image for their promo visual. I'd argue it is the season with my favourite visuals. A more vibrant look for horror, as we are taken to a summer house and eventually shown an ashy young girl standing amidst a field of vibrant yellow flowers, causing a terrific contrast that evokes fear by essentially corrupting what should have been a perfectly beautiful landscape. Sadly, low viewership followed by financial pitfalls caused Channel Zero to be dropped as a project. But because every season has a different director and revolves around a separate creepypasta, Channel Zero does not feel unfinished at all. Fear Itself, like Channel Zero, is another anthology series. It is a television series that is essentially operating as 13 separate hour-long films created by terrific directors and writers of horror, such as Stuart Gordon, John Landis, Brad Anderson, Ernest Dickerson, Rob Schmidt, and of course Mike Garris, who, fun fact, was one of the zombies in Michael Jackson's Thriller. The title is directly inspired by Roosevelt's "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself" quote. The series was created as a season replacement for Supernatural, but it went on to make its own mark in the genre. We get stories such as The Sacrifice, where 4 criminals encounter 3 sisters who are harbouring a monster, Family Man, where an accident causes a killer and a loving father to swap bodies, and In Sickness and Health, where the bride, on her wedding day, learns that her groom might just be a serial killer. Other episodes come with cannibalistic serial killers, zombies, werewolves, doppelgangers, and dead schoolgirls. And what comes with premium directors, top-tier visuals. Decent blood depiction too, as seen in the pilot itself, with a guy as white as plaster of police with tinges of grey having an opened mouth full of blood as red as the soul of a Louboutin. Some of the visuals are old school and a bit nostalgic really, a bit reminiscent of Evil Dead 2, but that adds to the appeal, and the zombies are really well done. Unfortunately, the show was supposed to get 5 more episodes and have a total episode count of 18, but while it was doing great, the 2008 Olympics led to it going on a hiatus for the sake of the time slot. Unfortunately, they never returned, which is a shame because it was a great show with a fantastic team behind it. Like, come on. You have people who did Tales from the Crypt, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, The Machinist, Wrong Turn, and a bunch of work with Michael Jackson. It's great. Harper's Island. Unlike Fear Itself and Channel Zero, which did enjoy their time as an anthology series, Harper's Island, despite being a cult classic, never attained the status of becoming an anthology as it was scrapped following the first season, and now enjoys its position as a horror mystery limited series. The plot is centered across family and friends who travel to Harper's Island for a destination wedding, but one of them is a killer who had gone on a killing spree and he'd even taken out the wife of the island sheriff. The killer was seemingly killed after this, but this was quite a good 7 years ago. The sheriff had sent his daughter, Abby, to live away from the island following the death of his wife, but she returns years later as her best friend Henry is getting married. Except, the killing resumes and everyone becomes a suspect, leading to the guests having to unlock mysteries of the island on their own. Many reviewers have claimed that Harper's Island is a bit Agatha Christie-esque, and I agree, as it is more like a horror flick, made apparent by the overwhelming presence of hot characters, while the dominance of suspense and investigations adds to the Agatha Christie-like atmosphere. While the first few episodes are more visually tame, Harper's Island slowly but steadily begins to get quite gory and grotesque, much more so than you would ever expect to see on CBS. My favourite thing about it visually though is that the banner looks like that of a sitcom where everyone seems happy and excited for a wedding, which, paired with the way the title's presented, that is in a more sinister font, causes a visual contrast. The show, despite its good reviews, suddenly lost popularity not due to the lack of quality, but because of its time slot change, causing their ratings to drop and ultimately resulting in Harper's Island untimely cancellation. Lovecraft Country. Now this is an example of a horror noir, as Lovecraft Country is an American black horror historical fantasy drama that's a lot of themes, and Lovecraft Country does it justice, which is valid since it also has a great ensemble both in front of and behind the curtain, and has been produced by Warner Brothers' Bad Robot, which worked on Lost and Westworld and Monkey Paw, the production house responsible for the terrific Get Out. So you can tell Lovecraft Country is going to have the visual game on lock, at the very least with Get Out and Westworld as its production predecessors. Anyway, the story introduces us to a young black man, Atticus Freeman, in the 1950s, living in a period of segregation, while his father, with whom he had a strained relationship, is missing. A Korean War veteran, he loves a work of pulp fiction and does not depart from his books even when he goes out in search of his father, but this leads him to a mysterious town where he begins to uncover dark secrets that have been plaguing it. And to make matters more tense, this town is seemingly based on one of the towns present across the tales of Lovecraft. To top it all off, Freeman has to do it all while dealing with the problems of being a black man in the white man's America. The show has lots of great horror mythos elements, really good performances too, and does very well as a social horror. What is interesting is that a horror noir is exploring Lovecraftian themes when Lovecraft was famously very racist, which I found unexpected but intriguing nonetheless. After all, creatives have rarely shied away from wanting to break certain barriers irrespective of race. Visually, things get quite grotesque, of course, and I love how the 1950s can feel on modern film. The juxtaposition of a contemporary, cool-toned horror backdrop with the pin-up hair and vibrant clothing styles of the 50s creates an interesting visual. And I also feel very drab visuals without vibrancy does not work very well with a predominantly black and brown unless it's drab because it's white, as seen in the Black Mirror episode of Men Against Fire. That aside, the horror visuals stand out to me a lot, more so because it is Lovecraft, so expect some very visceral things. While things were going well, certain complications such as sour on-set dynamics and a massive and unsustainable budget led to its cancellation, mostly the budget. The story had also been wrapped up in the first season itself, even though some say Lovecraft Country was meant to be an anthology, but I also cannot see how the show, even as an anthology, would work since the title would mean that one cannot change the premise and has to stick to the Lovecraftian town, which can get quite stale. So I'm not too mad about this one. I'm just happy I got to watch the first season, and the added layer of it working as a social horror and making things more difficult and complicated as a social horror added to the tension, because it's like having a protagonist that has to run from a zombie with the weight stuck to his feet. Blood Drive. Created by James Rowland, Blood Drive is a sci-fi action horror set in a post-apocalyptic future of 1999. I mean, it is the past technically, but it is presented as a dystopian future which exists as a result of the Great Fracking Quakes. These quakes are natural disasters that cause the United States to physically split apart, with a giant ravine known as the Scar being formed along the line of the Mississippi River. And as expected, corporations have swarmed in to exploit the situation, bringing us to the Hart Enterprises that exploits the discoveries from the absolute bottom of the ravine and retains power to control American society, politics, and of course, its entire economy. But there is also enormous environmental decline, with gas getting extremely expensive while water is scarce. Quite a realistic premise if you ask me, especially because I did visit the tropical countries in the summer and damn, it's getting hellish there. The Los Angeles police are central to the story, with protagonist Arthur Bailey, or Barbie, partnering with Grace D'Argento and moving the plot. The femme fatale Grace has an agenda of her own. There are moments such as the two taking part in a death race where the cars, instead of running on the hyper-expensive gasoline, run on a horrifying fuel, in this case human blood, which is why the story is called Blood Drive. And the master of ceremonies of the drive is in secret, an employee of Hart Enterprises, leading to Barbie and Grace eventually discovering the deep involvement of Hart in their own lives. This is not so much fantastical monster or body-possessing witch, as much as it is a social horror, with blood-run cars being the necessary fantasy element. Hopefully, it will continue to remain a fantasy because the gas prices are not. The show is campy and grindhouse-coded, and as such, comes with a lot of gore and blood. Of course it has blood, it is called Blood Drive. You can tell that it is B-grade, which it is, but the camp of it all makes it visually fascinating. It's kind of like if Carmilla left her vampiric castle and became a baddie in the Wild Wild West. except the economy is booming. This over-the-top grindhouse style led to Blood Drive getting a cult following, but low viewership nuked the show after the first season. Ash vs. Evil Dead. Bruce Campbell reprised his iconic role as Ash for Ash vs. Evil Dead. This work is Sam Raimi, Ivan Raimi, and Tom Speziali's comedy horror series, operated as a sequel to Raimi's Evil Dead trilogy. Ash has retired. It has been 3 decades since the Evil Dead, and Ash has roamed from town to town, working dead-end jobs, and has landed at the value stop to become a regular stop boy. And he works there alongside Pablo and Pablo's love interest, Kelly. Ash lives his life drinking at pubs, instead of fighting deadites like back in the day. But action and drama return to his life soon after he once again must face the Evil Dead and save humanity, this time with Pablo and Kelly by his side, who themselves go through a lot throughout the course of the series. Meanwhile, in Elk Grove, people had refused to believe that he had killed deadites, or what deadites really were, which led him to being accused of killing his friends, leaving him to his isolated fate. But it was in his destiny to return to his old life, as he had been unable to destroy the indestructible Necronomicon, and ultimately decided to just take care of the book since there was no viable alternative. Once again, we get another work with old school visuals filmed using modern technology, which has an interesting look of its own. It is mildly campy where it is needed and freaky where it needs to be freaky. Like who doesn't love a pair of all white eyes, eh? Or deadites made using modern technology. Sometimes the deadites feel a bit cute to me. Maybe it's my hear me out. The series quenches one's desire for watching body parts flying around while blood spatters everywhere. But the show was cancelled after a cliffhanging 3rd season where the main drama was wrapped up, but once again, a new problem was introduced. Due to the network airing it, Starz was a premium channel. Ash vs. Evil Dead ran on a high budget, but being a new channel with a fairly new app meant that they were not getting the necessary audience. A lot of the viewers were also legacy fans, which means we have a ton of younger people not being as interested. And you need the youth to get viewership from a premium but new app. This combined with rampant piracy led to the project being canned. Archive 81. At last, there is Archive 81, a supernatural horror by Rebecca Sonnenschein. You know it's great because James Wan is one of the producers and The Conjuring needs no introduction. Anyway, the show is based on the titular podcast. Protagonist Dan gets tasked by a mysterious company known as the LMG to restore an Hi-8 tape. As he went through those tapes, he realised that its creator, Melody, was a documentary filmmaker who was researching an apartment known as Visser and the mysterious people living in it. But disappearances of his residents led Melody to discovering the presence of something far more sinister than Dan could have ever anticipated. After he restores the introductory video, Dan gets personally hired as a conservator by LMG to restore every other tape as well, and Dan's parents and their deaths are seemingly tied to the Visser mystery. But it all happened 25 years ago, and yet Dan grew obsessed with cracking the case and saving Melody from what seems to be a demonic cult. Now, with the involvement of people in a cult, we get a bunch of religious horror and visuals that remind us of how we perceive a sinister party of the elites to go, the kind of dim but warm lighting we expect, masks with triangles and so on. The fact that the masks give a demonic vibe without being an imitation of the stereotypical Baphomet head is a great move. Otherwise, Archive 81 overall works great visually. It is very modern, which means the lighting is a bit more dim than our aforementioned campy entries. However, it is not like the dim lighting leads to us not being able to see anything, which is how Game of Thrones ended up. Overall, it's interesting and easy on the eyes. Lack of viewership, however, led to the cancellation of the show. I would say Archive 81, Marianne, and of course Hannibal are my favourites out of 10. I would have said 1899, but I think its predecessor being Dark kind of caused it to fall in my rankings within this list because I'm subconsciously comparing it to my favourite show of all time. And with that, we wrap up this video. Hope you enjoyed the recommendations, do share your opinions with us in the comments, and of course, like and subscribe, and have a great day.